Came with the Storm by Jake Rich. It was raining so hard, it was difficult to see 5 feet beyond the visor of his helmet. Added to the downpour was the fact that the wind was picking up and buffering the bike from side to side. Matt could also hear small eruptions in the background and see bright flashing lights in the distant skies. A bigger storm was on its way. He finally decided to pull in for his own safety. It would have been stupid to continue in such bad conditions. The roads were slowly turning into a swimming pool with huge puddles everywhere. He remembered his father's words. When you can't see what's under the surface, that's when it's time to stop. Matt's father was a keen biker, and it had rubbed off on his son. He stopped and stood astride his scooter for a moment, trying to figure out what to do. The engine rattled and vibrated between his thighs. It was Saturday night and pretty late, 11:30. He was supposed to have been home hours ago, but his team had won. It was Halloween night and the hockey game was a charity match. He stayed behind with his friends to celebrate, but didn't drink. Drinking and driving his bike while drunk had killed his father. Matt stood balancing the scooter, undecided on where to go. It was really dark, and he could just make out the road a short distance beyond his headlight. The glass of his visor was fogging up, making it even more difficult to see anything. His clothes were soaked through, even though they were supposed to be weatherproof. By now, he was in a foul mood. The diversion sign on the road had led him to an unfamiliar and remote area. There was nothing around. The only person he'd seen was someone walking a dog way back up the road. I have to get to shelter. I can't go driving through that shit, he said, looking at the ever-rising river of water. The lightning strikes were getting closer now, with thunder not far behind. He lifted his visor so he could get a better view of his surroundings. A large lightning strike revealed a building to his left, and he was parked at the entrance. There were no lights in any of the windows, and as he looked around, he understood why. There were streetlights lined along the road, but they weren't lit either. Matt turned towards the darkened structure so he could get a better view with the headlight of his scooter. A buckled sign read, "Keep out! Unsafe building! Site to be demolished!" He saw a set of chain-linked gates, one barely holding on by the hinges, and the other had fallen to one side. He was cold, wet, and tired. The thought of a dry place to stay until the storm had burned itself out seemed like a good idea. He rode through the gap in the gates and stopped outside a set of shuttered doors. As luck would have it, they were hitched up halfway. He dipped his head and slowly drove inside. He instantly felt better being in the dry. He parked up and used the headlight again to get his bearings. He lifted his bike onto its stand. Matt removed his helmet and put it on the seat. He searched around and found a lamp and some matches. When he shook it, oil sloshed around inside and he soon had light. He switched off his engine to save the fuel. He realized he was in what appeared to be an old warehouse. He found a leather armchair to sit on. It was pretty beat up, but comfortable enough. He fished out his phone to let his wife know where he was, but there was no signal here, probably due to the storm. He looked around from the comfort of the seat. The room had racking across the walls, which had pots and rusted stools and various other things that had been left behind. There was a big metal drum next to his chair, and Matt could smell the familiar whiff of diesel as he worked in a garage. He felt sleepy and sat for a while looking through the doors at the looming storm. It wasn't so scary from in here, and the light show was quite spectacular. And that's when he saw something outside that caught his attention. Matt sat up in the chair and rubbed his eyes. He waited for the lightning to spark again, and when he did, he saw someone standing in the middle of the road. Only a glimpse, but as the light faded into blackness, so did the figure. Matt sat there rigid, and the heavy clap of thunder that followed made him shake so much that he almost fell off the seat. "Aw, Jesus, you fucking idiot, Matt." He scolded himself for being such a scaredy cat. He refocused and leaned forward, keeping his eye line just below the skirt of the roller door. He waited, eyes fixed, hands gripped on both sides of the chair, swallowing hard. Another burst of bleaching white light, so prolonged this time that it kept up its brilliance for a few seconds longer. And that's when Matt saw not only a tall, darkened figure standing motionless in the road, but also the long, shimmering blade that it was carrying. Matt stood up and suddenly found himself shaking with nerves. He didn't know what to do. Did he really see that, or was it his imagination? He was tired, and it could have been a trick of the light. He waited again, and after the loud rumble of thunder had subsided, he concentrated. When another sharp flash of lightning came and ripped along the sky, he saw the image of the figure, this time a lot closer. So close that Matt could see the sword perfectly. His instinct was to run, but he didn't know this place. The best idea that popped into his head was to pull down the shutter door. He urgently grabbed hold and pulled with all his might. Slowly, the rust gave into the pressure, and Matt feverishly tugged at it like someone possessed. Soon, fast footsteps were heavily sloshing through puddles, and he knew it was coming for him. "Close, you fucking useless doors! Close for fuck's sake!" he screamed. But as he pulled it down, it jammed, about a foot from the ground. The running stopped, and the figure smashed into the door. Matt nearly lost his balance, but managed to stay upright. He suddenly felt something grip tightly around his left ankle. He screamed and tried to tug his leg away as hard as he could. He used his right foot to stamp on its arm and heard a shriek of agony from the other side. The clawed hand let go of Matt's foot and pulled away. A huge explosion of lightning lit up the room, and Matt quickly shuffled backwards as fast as he could. As he did so, saw the glint of the sword poke through the gap and slide across the ground like a daisy cutter. The tip caught his leg and cut through his leathers, slashing into his skin. Matt let out a deafening scream and instantly fell to the ground, blood spilling from the fresh cut. He reached out to stem the flow of blood, his face creased up in fear and agony, and that's when he saw the attacker's eyes for the first time as it dipped down under the door. Close up, it was honestly the scariest thing he'd seen in his life. It didn't look human. It had big, crazy eyes, the whites stained with blood. Its mouth was wide open, revealing yellow, jagged teeth, teeth that could easily tear through flesh in seconds. Each sharp point appeared to be already tinged with fresh, glistening blood. Matt thought about the person walking the dog and wondered if this thing had already attacked someone tonight. The monster looked straight at him and let out a long, piercing squeal. It was such a haunting sound that it ripped deep into Matt's very soul. He stared back, his mouth wide open and his eyes filled with tears. The creature began bucking up against the door, causing it to shudder. With each impact, it let out a gut-wrenching screech, like a wild animal trapped in a cage. The lightning again lit up the inside of the shed, and the thunderous roar that accompanied it shook the whole structure. Matt knew that the door would eventually collapse, or the beast would give up and find another way into the building. Either way, he had to get out of there, and right now, if he wanted to survive. He pushed himself upright, but the pain in his leg was excruciating. "Ah, fuck!" he screamed. The blood seeped from the tear in his trousers and leaked into his boot. Bang! 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 The night beast was relentlessly smashing into the door, squealing and squirming on the other side. Matt was terrified. Think, Matt, he told himself. Then he remembered the oil drum. He looked at the lamp, and the idea formed. He started his bike and let it tick over. He limped over to the diesel drum and pushed at it. It was light, but there was definitely liquid sloshing around in there. The metal screw-top disc was missing, and that's probably why he'd smelled the diesel in the first place. The demon was still going wild outside, beating up against the door. The storm was grinding away in strikes and rumbles. Matt pushed as hard as he could, and the drum eventually tipped over and landed with a clang. The dark liquid spilled out and sloshed towards the gap in the door. Matt watched as it pooled at the feet of the monster. He lifted the lamp and smashed it down on the fuel. Within a split second, it caught and exploded into life, sending a river of flames along the ground. Matt jumped on his bike and drove off and didn't look back. All he could hear were the squeals of the monster in his wake. He just hoped the fire would kill it. He He drove deeper into the warehouse, and the headlight provided a muted view ahead, but he didn't care. His heart was pumping so hard that he thought he was going to have a heart attack. He picked up speed and soon saw a plastic curtain blocking his way. He didn't know what was behind it, but he couldn't stop now. Thunder rumbled overhead, and more lightning gave him small bursts of vision. He tensed as he plowed through the vertical plastic strips. In an instant, he was free, and a bright stripe lit up a possible exit at the back. His heart lifted, and the joy in his face was a picture. He'd made it. It was only a matter of 6 meters. The bike suddenly plunged into the ground. The front wheel hit something hard as it dipped, and the crash sent the rider flying through the darkness, and he eventually tumbled across the floor. For a few seconds, Matt lay there partially dazed and truly disoriented. He tried to move, but found he was unable. A fresh lightning strike revealed the worst. He could see the flash of metal sticking out from his stomach. He realized that he'd driven over a pit. He wasn't to know the geography of the place. His bike was at the bottom, and he was slumped up against some kind of a rack. He'd impaled himself on a spike. He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth and gushed down his chin. Oh my fucking God, he thought. He couldn't speak. He realized he was going to die. No one knew he was here. He'd lose too much blood by the time someone came to his rescue. Then he realized that his mobile phone was in his jacket. He could feel himself getting weaker. He dipped into his pocket and found it. There wasn't a signal that in an emergency, you can still get a call out to the police.
911, what's your emergency?
The voice crackled through the speaker. Matt tried to answer, but his words came out in a gurgle.
Emergency services, are you in need of assistance?
Police, he choked. Suddenly, the plastic curtains burst open and the demon came tearing through, fully ablaze. It screeched as it advanced and raised its sword to slice him to pieces. Matt's eyes were wide in terror, but he couldn't move to defend himself. The monster fell directly into the same pit and disappeared. There must have been more fuel at the bottom, because a wall of flame erupted from within. Matt looked on as the flames reached the ceiling and set fire to the other flammable liquids around him. The fire creeping closer and closer, licking around his body. Help! He tried to call out, but all that escaped his mouth was a gargled mess. Soon, the whole building was a vast inferno. The heat melted his skin and scorched his eyeballs. And the last thing he saw, before he died, was the smiling, bloody eyes of the demon as it stood over him. The end. It Came From the Storm was written by Jake Ridge. Narrated by me, Matt Lees. With audio production by me, Matt Lees. Happy Halloween.